Matters from the public. Is there anyone in the public who would like to address us on any item today? Come right forward, please.
Good afternoon. Sean Tubbs, Piedmont Environmental Council. Just have some comments about the Unified Planning Work Program on your agenda today. In particular, the 8 bullet points that are on page 6. When I was just writing about transportation, I probably wouldn't have given this document much of a quick read, but as both a member of the public who's trying to do better in terms of my own transportation choices and a professional advocate for DEC, I find them inspirational. The first one starts with expand and enhance transit. I firmly believe we're at a time where the planning that we're doing now behind the scenes is going to result in a higher ridership. And I think we need to ensure that the approach by all 3 of our transit agencies is customer focused and dedicated to making the transit experience better for those who rely on it and to attract more people to become users of those agencies. I think I mentioned last month here at this meeting, I think I did, that I plan to spend the last month trying to use the system. We have the system that we have, and trying to break through the reasons, the excuses I was making to not take the system, which we were talking about earlier. I've been documenting this experience on Twitter, and people are paying attention. People are interested in the work that I'm doing, asking me questions. I'm connecting them to different routes that might be on different systems, trying to get a better sense of the private and public systems that we have in place already before we try to make them better. There is a learning curve to using CAT, and I want to report that I have broken through my mental breaks, and I now have a routine. And I'm committing to do this as often as possible. Bullet 4 of the work program talks about taking more visible steps to better integrate transportation planning with local government land use plans. This is crucial. As you may have seen, last week's census data update reported that since 2010, we have 5,000 additional people in Charlottesville, 10,000 people in Albemarle County. And as you're going to see in your long-range transportation plan earlier, we know we're not going to be able to build our way in the congestion that will result if everybody wants to get in a car to get around in the urban area. So I can just say that it's, after a month of driving, I've learned a little bit about this, and I'm hoping that working through this plan so we can really go through those bullet points and try to figure out ways to ride share, to work better, to efficiency, to save money in budgets, and I really look forward to working with you on that in the future. Thanks. Thank you.
Sean, I am one of your Twitter followers.
Okay.
Watching react.
Anyone else? All right, we will close that part of the agenda and move on to any other responses that we want to give to Sean's encouragement. It's always great to get encouragement. On our agenda, are there changes or additions or corrections that need to be made to the agenda before we go? I see none. So do we have a motion to accept the agenda? Maybe we don't need to just accept it. Okay, it's accepted. Oh, yes, it's required vote. Okay.
So moved.
We have so moved and we have a second.
Second.
All right, very good. All in favor? Aye. So now we have the agenda accepted. Moving on to the approval of meeting minutes from March 27th. Any corrections, additions, changes, or a motion on the minutes?
I just want to mention that Rebecca White was here representing me, and she's referred to in the notes, but she's not listed as non-voting alternates.
I think, well, yeah, it is.
It depends on when you uploaded it. What we sent out a week ago, that corrected us immediately, and what's online is correct. So, yes, we should point out an update since a week ago, Rebecca White was here.
So the
I
one,
saw her email, so I was really confused when I looked these over.
Yes, what was sent out, she was not on.
Okay.
so we do have corrected minutes at hand on that issue. Any other corrections we need to make? All right, we have a motion on the minutes.
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
Very good. All in favor of adopting the minutes? Aye. Any opposed? None. So we will accept adopt our minutes for March 27th and charging on to the 2045 LRTP public hearing. Do we have an introduction before we open the public hearing, or should we go ahead at least?
Yeah, I think going through the information first and then going here. That's what we would like to do. Okay. Very very briefly here, before we pull up the document and look at it more specifically, just a reminder of all the steps that we have gone through to get to this point for the LRTP, goals and objectives, identifying deficiencies, evaluating scenarios, and then finally, to the best of our ability or to the extent necessary, constraining projects based on the available funding estimates. So we're now at the stage of compiling all of this information into the LRTP. So yeah, brief overview, reminder, we will be reviewing the complete plan draft today, or looking over it. We're able to respond to questions, and then also holding the first public hearing today. We will then be holding another hearing at the May MPO Policy Board meeting, and expecting the Policy Board to approve the plan at that point. That is the anticipated schedule. And the document itself, there is an updated version online that was updated as of yesterday. So if you had some previous version you had downloaded, I think it would be best if anyone looking at this on a tablet or something currently would get on the website, the MPO website, the same link that has been indicated everywhere, and download or view online this draft. The first page says April 23, 2019.
Great, thank you.
No like super major changes, of course, from previous drafts, but some additional things added, some response or feedback from CTAC in particular has been integrated over the last few days. So as far as going through this document, I think maybe chapter by chapter, just kind of generally, I can give an overview and then ask for any feedback or questions from the policy board. So there's first kind of a preface, we don't think there's any comments on that. I suppose if there are any comments on the executive summary. Any thoughts on the first few pages here? Okay, chapter 1, regional demographics. So this chapter has not changed significantly since last meeting when we did have a chance to look at it as well. So any comments on the regional demographics chapter?
I think you've added some more maps and views, dividing things in different categories. So from 2 meetings ago, I think we'd already taken care of those suggestions. Last time. It's a lot of word information.
Yeah, and it's really good, kind of infographics helps. Pie charts and current maps.
Any other questions on chapter 1?
Great, looking at chapter 2, this is a broad overview, transportation assessment, so some information about roadways in the MPO, public transit, has been some change with one chart about public transit removed from previously. Also a bit of a reorganization to ensure that public transit and bicycle and pedestrian are addressed right here at the beginning of the chapter. A nice picture of the new bicycle and pedestrian bridge over the railroad tracks that opened.
Yeah,
the grand
Saturday,
opening
great.
was this past Saturday. So this is a picture the city has provided back when that was set in place.
Watching it happen was pretty exciting. Every 2 days,
Yeah.
it was dramatically different.
Any comments, thoughts, questions on anything else in chapter 2? Chapter 3 is an overview, planning for uncertainty, discussing some different changing technologies. Again, some of this was provided last time. There's particularly something CTAC is, members of CTAC have referenced and brought up are electric vehicles. So that's something where more information has been added. Sorry, I skipped it here on accident. More information has been added about electric vehicles and also about that connection between transportation and land use that was just referenced in the public comment. There is now a paragraph here talking about that as an important part of creating the sustainable and resilient transportation system and reducing transportation emissions.
You mentioned you had a section that included scooters.
Yes.
The scooters are not, they're still in, they're in a very, very serious trial right now. There is not any consensus that I can tell among our community that they want them. And bike share is time tested, but the scooters, even putting them together, at least make sure that there's real good, strong qualification that the scooters are being tested right now. And the more I learn about them, the more concerned I get because they're just thrown away. They're not easily reused, they're not reused at all, and they have lithium batteries in them. So I really wanna asterisk that or something, that these are being seriously evaluated for their sustainability and their equity, actually, because they're not being used by only a certain segment of our community.
People who perhaps really need the transportation because they don't have other alternatives can't access those.
Yeah, it's a problematic form of transportation right now that I don't want to put it in the company of all the others that are really time tested and evaluated.
Well, I think the idea of this chapter is to put some of those new or unclear aspects in there. So the one right before bike share and scooters is transportation network companies like Uber and Lyft, which I think a lot of the same concerns that you're discussing about scooters have to do with. It's different, of course.
It's different. I'm just making a comment.
Yes,
No one else shares that. I'm seriously concerned about scooters, and I don't like advocating for them at this point in time in any way, or hint that they're being advocated for when we're having a trial about them right now in the city of Charlottesville.
Yeah.
And I know it's pretty firm about that, if no one else has it.
Well, I would applaud your caution, because I came out of here at the last meeting, went to the corner and fell over one that was parked around the corner where I couldn't see it, right on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
So I'm not too thrilled about them personally either.
Right.
So perhaps one compromise would be to have the bike share paragraphs be on their own and some other section added where it's things that are really, really, really new or something, unless it can be taken out. About that. This is our 2045, so.
I would, I think I would have a middle position to say, I agree, I think it should be broken out and it should be a separate thing, and it should include more qualifiers. It should say there are a lot of questions to be answered if this were to scale from, and a lot of other best practices to look at out there. So, and I've been here, we have a hole in the field right now, some kind of community engagement thing. We're looking for it, and that's, we really need to hear what people are saying. I mean, I know that I've anecdotally, I've seen like good and bad. I know that a lot of communities out there have had a whole, like to move from the pilot to full scale, they have a lot of tools that they put on top of it. Like they have areas where you can park them, they have penalties for poor operation of them. It's kind of, I was in Santa Monica recently for a conference, and it was like a disaster. There were fields of these scooters that had fallen over on their sides. There were 4 or 5 different companies that were operating them, and it was really like it was a bad experience as a visitor there. And so the degree of safety you require and how if you have zones where they can't go to. So I think we have a lot of questions to answer for the city in terms of taking this. So I agree. I don't think that we want to like full on embrace this in its current form.
Yeah, generally speaking, this chapter is not saying this is what we should do with these technologies. It is just kind of acknowledging they're there. And so,
the guidance is to make it more clear.
Yes.
Make it more clear that
Once you
this is
say
heavily.
good, but I would be glad to go back
break it
to
out in separate
Yeah,
sections.
we want it in separate sections.
Yeah.
And a high concern.
It's a very high concern.
Yeah.
There are some cities that have done full
damage and then decided either to eliminate them and not use
Mm-hmm.
them because of some of the problems highlighted here.
And there's differences between companies, Lime and Bird. And I don't want in any way to make this be viewed as an endorsement of that form of technology when it's highly questionable.
Makes sense.
I will praise on the next page, the 6 boxes about the this one, all the different gradations of work on the vehicles. Kathy McGee has made this kind of presentation numerous times and helped me finally begin to understand this. Because we're 50 years before we figure out which way we're going on this. So, I think having that right up front. The most difficult are going to be when it's completely or more 50-50 as opposed to 1%, 99%. Then we're going to have a whole lot of things to deal with, but that graphic really does give some good information. So,
Any other comments on chapter 3, excuse me? Okay, we'll move to chapter 4. This is an overview of the LRTP, so providing some of the purpose information, discussing the national goals and objectives, LRTP goals. So these first few chapters that we just went through are introduction, background, overview. So this is kind of introducing the heart of the LRTP and the process and other aspects related to it. So yeah, overview, purpose. One of the key things included here, and this is not entirely final because we're still waiting on some state and federal guidance, but are the national goals, the national performance measures particularly. So these are things, we've often just referred to them as MAP 21, the required national performance measures that were started through the MAP 21 legislation. So as an MPO, we have set targets for the majority of these, the roadway-based ones at this point, and also received information from the transit agencies and DRPT on TAM, the Transit Asset Management. So in this chapter, we've put the targets that have been set so far, but there may be additional language or clarification from VDOT.
Waiting to hear back from, develop some of the language and then send it up to FHWA review and get received concurrence from them back in. As soon as we get it, we'll pass it along.
So what would be the process if we don't get that information by May?
I mean, we can amend the plan and include it. It's just, if we don't have it at the time, we put in what we've got and then add it later once we get that information.
I would say we want to footnote that
Yeah.
in that section.
And John or Chuck, can you give any more information on the pavement and bridge performance measures? It looks pretty scary and sad that we have a 35% good condition in the pavements for our sort of smaller roads. And I mean, it's real, it's absolute, because we're as John knows, the really still residents have been pounding on him now. They've been kind of pounding on me, so they're pounding on him instead, to get these things underway. And it's hard in the winter season when I can't work. So everybody's very joyful that the papers are now out working going through here. But are these sort of consistent numbers that we've seen for the last many years?
Oh,
Even
no,
before the
no.
gas tax nonsense,
No,
there actually was
they-
real money?
Those performance measures are relatively new in terms of what's being measured. But it's consistent with how we're performing. And one example, they've broken out, you see bridge area deck in good condition, which didn't used to be a performance measure, but it was, and that's surface area. So it used to be by bridge. So in Colquitt, we have a lot of small bridges, we're able to keep up, but if you have a large bridge, it still counts as the same as small. In the past, now with the deck area, that makes a difference in terms of those larger bridges and maintaining those. So we've been tracking those in our internal performance measures as well, and most of the districts meet the majority of the new federal performance measures. Not all, and there's some areas that are lacking, but it's not a inconceivable performance measure to meet. We're in relatively good shape in our state.
I had in mind about the piers on the bridges, just because we were talking recently about the little bridge in Fraser Bridge. It's like 12 feet wide and 12 feet long, that I guess its piers are falling apart, which is why it's gonna be not a simple drop out.
Right.
So that's in here somewhere, this looks like
Right,
it's.
each
supposed to-
element is then measured separately, so that like in the past, you might have, you have the substructure, superstructure. This one kind of breaks out the deck area, the joints, and some other areas, so any one component that's poor, the bridge becomes poor. So it's harder to meet the standard. The other big aspect of this is when they talk about good, they raise that from 6 to a 5 rating out of 10. So again, the overall, it has increased the need for, more preventive maintenance work to keep all the components of the bridge in good shape to keep them on. But we're steadily improving compared to nationally. So.
Great, thank you. Any questions for?
Then moving on in chapter 4, the goals and objectives that were identified and approved by the policy board very early on in the LRTP process are provided here.
Is there anything in there about multimodal? Where do I see that? Accessibility, mobility.
I mean, it's many places. Accessibility and mobility refers to transit and travel demand management, among other things. Yeah, transit multiple times. Economic development says assure activity centers are designed to accommodate a range of transportation modes.
But it never talks about cycling and pedestrian.
Environment and community says incorporate environmentally context-sensitive design into roadway, bicycle, pedestrian facilities. For safety, key safety deficiencies in regional networks across all modes, including the needs of bicycle and pedestrian users.
So this was the framework on which you developed the number scale that was included that into the
Correct.
I just want to make sure that was popped out, because the reason why I look like a prize fighter today is because I had a serious cycling accident on Monday related to the fact that the manhole cover was 2 inches below the surface of the paving. My bike could not roll over it. I torqued on it, and I was twisted off the bike and crashed, and thank God I had a helmet. But I am really aware of this now. More than ever. I mean, it's been a long time since I had that kind of scare. So, and I don't know, that's a level of detail that I'm sure is not quite being caught in this. But I was walking up here and ran into Peter Krebs, and he says, I know exactly which manhole you're talking about. So evidently this is a detail that is getting overlooked, and it's highly dangerous. As long, I mean, if that's not of a concern anywhere, so I just want to just underscore that the safety of our roads for all modes is critical, especially in a town like Charlottesville where people are using bikes and walking, and it's.
Well, when I'm driving up Preston, I go like this because the manholes there are 3 inches down too, and my little car goes bang. and just
Well,
hits the cheeks off.
okay, so
It hits me in the car.
where do we catch that kind of detail?
I think it's in the city planning for your.
But doesn't that somehow get into the urban allocation is adjusted accordingly? I mean, I don't think anybody thinks of that detail.
Wouldn't most of that be maintenance?
Basically, when they resurface the road, they're supposed to adjust the manholes to
Lift them up.
They're supposed to adjust the
Yes.
manholes.
meet the pavement.
So that's a VDOT requirement.
Well, that's just maintenance, that's usually written into the contracts that have to be done. We basically try to not have structures in the pavement just for that reason.
Right.
That's part of the schedule work that we've got to do, when we do surface overlays, but I mean, I don't know, the city would maintain that, because they do all the city stuff themselves.
mean, I think that there's a good example from a bicycle standpoint is when you start getting into more of the corridor reviews. When we did the US Bike Route 76, we went down US 76 and took pictures. I mean, that
Oh,
was
okay.
like, I mean, one of those is Route 53 that goes to Monticello, and we've got pictures of that, of the concern areas. That would be the type of thing so that you could address those with maintenance. I know I've got my pet peeve, sewer manhole is right in the corner. Right at the edge of the brick wall as you're right before you get to the bridge underpass. If it doesn't drop down that much, it doesn't drop down. So, I mean, there are a number, but I think it has to be addressed in the corridor reviews.
Okay, all right.
Very good.
Okay, and then finally, there's a description here of the process, the project categories that are used in the remaining chapters, the planning tools used. So this is where there's a description of the model, the travel demand model that was used, and then also the fact that we use some GIS tools. And then there's a description of the public outreach and engagement that was completed, primarily the open houses that have been held over the last year and a half for this plan. Any other comments on chapter 4? Okay, chapter 5 is a transportation deficiencies overview. So it starts with some information about roads and some maps of congestion in the region that were created from the travel demand model. So projecting forward to 2045 and indicating some information about potential congestion then. Then some information about road or bridges and intersections is provided. And one note that I've made a little clearer since the CTAC meeting, they pointed out the numbers on the bridges here, that these do correspond to numbers that are provided in chapter 8, as far as the bridges that are already funded to be updated, or the bridges that are listed in the list for the LRTP of needing improvement. And then some information about intersections that particularly comes from the VDOT analysis of potential for safety improvement, or PSI. Then the transit network is provided here with an assessment of, or mapping of who is within a quarter mile, or relative estimate of the number of people who live within a quarter mile of bus stops, and also employment within a quarter mile. So there's information about that and the maps about that shown. And one thing that was done for one of the open houses that got positive feedback, and some CTAC members in particular have indicated was helpful, is not just showing which stops are and who's within a quarter mile of the stop, but also emphasizing the frequency or the headway of the routes. So this map shows what areas are within a quarter mile of a bus that comes at least once every 20 minutes.
That's really helpful.
So that's the blue areas here show that these bus stops, a bus comes at least once every 20 minutes. For the purple areas, the bus comes somewhere between once every 20 minutes and every 45 minutes. And then the reddish areas here, the bus comes only once every less than 45 minutes. So I think in all these cases, it's an hour, once every hour. And this does include UTS routes, but we put the CAT bus map here. That could be updated if there's any lack of clarity, or anyone has any other suggestions for formatting this.
You know, for the equal section, page 5.
Yeah.
just because we're the policy board, I will raise a very germinal idea that I've just started having conversations within the city council and staff about a opposite way of looking at this issue, which is instead of looking at low use, inefficient lines as something that needs to be addressed through more of the same, which is more public transportation going along those routes, that there are a lot of localities around the country that are using rideshare technology to disrupt this and say we could actually do door-to-door service for these underserved, and it's a greater equity solution and it's more efficient using new technology than just putting more resources into highly inefficient lines that are going to populations that are dispersed, and it's just like this is ripe for disruption, for using technology to address it, and Brad is obviously an expert at a platform that does this, and so this is, so and we've been, this is a little premature for me to raise right now, because I've been having a couple of conversations internally, just like, and West Valley and I've been talking about it a little bit, we haven't really matured it to the level, but I have looked at a lot of other cities where they've just like said, the whole argument that it's more equitable to try and put more resources into these.
Well, the regional
Single
transit
lines.
partnerships talking about this all the time.
Okay, so this is, so we'll connect all the dots.
Yeah, we need to connect the dots.
There's a lot of
Yeah.
work out there. I mean, we looked at about Arlington, Texas, and a bunch of other cities that have just said we can use different technology. It's more equitable to use this new disruptive approach.
Yeah, no, we've been having these conversations, we need to probably not do them in parallel.
Probably.
Maybe we can get a presentation from you guys, or whatever you have from the RTP. Because it's clearly, that's what's front and center in our conversations about what do you do about increasing the frequency without ignoring the fact that you don't have a ridership.
You can go to people's houses.
So, yeah, if you can get rid of some of those lines and have some other means of transportation, then you can actually get more efficiency on the fixed routes.
Yeah, that's where I would say this chapter and this plan
Just
as a whole,
redeploy the assets.
yeah, isn't really, proposing anything specific.
Yeah, it's
So
just stay
this
as it
map
is.
might look like red is a complete deficiency, but if you look at this map and see what the density is at those places that are served very infrequently, that might lead you to a more creative solution like you're referring to, as opposed to just increasing the frequency.
Yeah, because you need to look at the density, to look at the frequency. But yeah,
I was just looking back in the things of the future chapter, and perhaps something about the last mile with the transit might deserve a paragraph there that we could
right.
because I can't, because it is something that we're trying to do.
That is the
It's in our draft TDP, so language could be taken from there. Send that over if you want to.
Talking about first and last mile.
No, more of that on-demand.
That's sort of transit description thing that Mike was talking about, because there's lots of different terms.
Yeah,
It does fall in that category, the last mile.
Increased coverage.
Right. And I know Andrew Lunshine was studying this too.
It's going to be neighborhood stuff.
Mm-hmm.
No job necessarily, so having to go to each of the houses, that's good.
Oh, yeah.
That would be the way to speak about it.
yeah, exactly. I was just looking at what we already have written regarding transit. I don't think it completely covers what you're referring to right now, so I'll see if I can add something in. But it does refer to autonomous transit vehicles, including those being tested in Albemarle County. So yeah, there are a number of things mentioned here under transit already, but I think that idea of a more on-demand transit service is not specifically referenced here, so.
I'm glad you clarified the maps, the deficiency, the roadway maps being 2045, because that was beginning to get thirsty about my trucks and my precious roundabouts by the airport who were just working great today. I said, wait a minute, you're not deficient, it's 20 more years we're talking about. I get it, all right. There's lots of blood in the ditch, all those things.
Okay, we now have similar maps for bicycle and pedestrian that we had for transit, indicating the existing infrastructure to the extent that we have it, data about the existing infrastructure available currently, and the number of people who are within 500 feet of that infrastructure is calculated and is shown on these maps. So for bicycle and then for pedestrian.
It's interesting.
And one thing that was added to the conclusion following some discussion we had was in the CTAC meeting was the fact that some of this data is not completely up to date and that that's an ongoing effort between the city and county and UVA to bring it up to date, but also other aspects of data where bicycle, pedestrian, transit aren't as sufficient as necessary for some of this evaluation. So there's now a brief paragraph over here indicating that need for additional data related to bicycle and pedestrian and transit networks and usage of those networks, number of users, those sorts of things. So the need for that is referenced in the conclusion. Any other comments on chapter 5?
I liked having an employment density map. That's the other reason people use transit, it's not just residential density. Yeah, it's good to see. Yeah.
Chapter 6 then summarizes the evaluation process that was completed for the roadway and transit projects. So this is the project review that was completed and then the scenario evaluations that were completed, as well as the initial identification of projects. So here's the list of roadway projects that were considered, followed by the transit projects that were considered, and then the map showing each of those. Then the description of the project review criteria that was used. So those pages that were shown with environmental impacts, social impacts, and so on. And then the pages for each project, each roadway and transit project, are included as Appendix A of the LRTP document. So then the scenario measures were described, which, as Anne referenced earlier, were directly related to the goals and objectives that were identified. And then the scenario evaluation process and the rounds of scenarios were summarized here. So the first round of scenarios, as you may recall, was split up mostly by the type of the project. So capacity projects made up scenario A, connectivity projects made up scenario B, and multimodal projects made up scenario C, with the smart scale projects, projects that had been applied for smart scale being included in all three of those scenarios. So the information that was presented to you all at the time about that, the results of that, is included here, as well as how that led to then the creation of scenarios for round 2 of the evaluation. And then the following page provides that final graphic and final information about all of the scenarios. So the results from rounds 2 and round 3. And notably indicates that round 3 scenario F, the project projects that were a part of that scenario are listed here. And then I believe it's on the final page here. It's indicated that those highlighted in green scenario F projects are identified as priority projects for the region, with the understanding that this prioritization may not lead to more immediate funding of projects given the competitive nature of most available funding. So both in this chapter and chapter 8, where we talk about constrained and unconstrained, we're trying to be as clear as we can in the text of the document that we've worked to create regional priorities, but it will ultimately be smart scale and other funding sources that determine whether the projects get funded or not. Just because it's a regional high priority here doesn't immediately mean it will be funded in any specific sense.
Is there a total dollar amount somewhere that it would take to finish all these projects?
No. Would you like that to be included?
I would just like to know it,
Or not?
just to understand the magnitude of the problem.
Yeah, that's it.
And if it's in here, it might help emphasize the problem.
There was something floating around, that we had 125 million, and there was 276 or something in wishes.
There was a number like that.
I don't remember the details of that.
Some of the scenarios have that information.
Yeah, I mean, we have the information,
Yeah.
it is not presented in the document currently. So it's probably chapter 8 where we can
Yeah.
adjust some things to have that
Okay.
shown.
Okay.
Yes, because,
As a snapshot, we can look at it again and figure out what's worse off.
Yeah.
I read.
It's 5283 on this, it's page 88. Sorry.
It's 5283.
Thanks, Village.
They're constrained, but
yeah, I mean, there are constrained numbers. I think the point you're getting at is that, and this is where we would do it, we currently only present cost estimates for the things that are being constrained. You're indicating you want the cost estimates included over here also, that would be a total number
Yeah,
for the vision list.
yeah,
Which I'm seeing some of these, the ones we got from Charlottesville and Albemarle, we do not, that I'm aware of, have costs for all of those. But for the rest of these, we do have costs and we can present them here.
I just think that would be helpful, just really get the full scope of it.
I think it would be very helpful for the general public because it's hard to wrap your head around the
Right,
hundreds of
because-
millions of dollars you're talking about.
Right. And yet, people complain about the roads all the time, and they complain to the local government about them all the time. So it's important to have some numbers to say the magnitude is just great. And for a local government to solve these problems, we'd have to raise tax rates like 20-fold.
And that's what was done in the bike ped plan also, where there is this kind of large number or large range of what it might take to complete that whole network proposed there.
Right.
So, makes sense to
Yeah,
indicate that here
have
as
a,
well.
have a parallel.
Yeah.
Go.
And I think it is part of that, which you'll see in the Unified Work Program. One of the tasks we have for fiscal year 20 is to look at what are the alternative funding sources
Yes.
for transportation.
Because we don't have tiger grants anymore. So much of the federal money is dried up, unless you're finding some new sources.
Private investors want to get things going. So, for the very first time, we have a project where the builder is actually doing the cutting edge. Apparently other jurisdictions.
For road infrastructure.
That, other jurisdictions have been doing this for years, and we just never have, so we're kind of catching up
Okay,
to this project.
interesting. But then they paying for it by toll or something? How are you paying for it?
They're just, it's part of their cost of doing business for their project.
Oh, okay, wow.
Any final comments on chapter 6, the evaluation? Great. Chapter 7 is a brief chapter that indicates the different analyses that were done outside of this plan that were brought in. So for intersections, it indicates that information from VDOT's analyses regarding potential for safety improvement is included in the plan, or is used for the plan. For bridges, it again refers to analyses done by VDOT and information there that's used to create the lists that are then presented in chapter 8. And for the regional bicycle and pedestrian network, it of course references the Jefferson Area Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan. And this is a map from that plan. Thoughts? Okay. Finally, then is chapter 8, where the projects are identified with constrained and vision lists. So first, there is an overview of information and then providing the funding, the projected to the best of our abilities, funding estimates between now and 2045, and brief explanation of how those estimates were created, using information from VDOT and combined with information about previous funding received in the region. So that's the information provided here. Then the projects that are currently in the state's 6-year plan are provided on these pages. So a few funded bridge projects are shown here, and then information about the funded roadway and intersection projects and funded bicycle and pedestrian projects. And then there are the constrained and vision lists. So this is the page we already skipped ahead to, information about the cost of the projects that we have indicated in the constrained list. And then we can add costs along with all the other projects that are indicated as roadway vision lists. Then also the transit projects that have been considered throughout this process. Then the intersection vision list and the bridge list provided on these pages. I don't believe any of this has changed since the last policy board meeting. I believe at the last policy board meeting I referenced that we had changed some of the language regarding the bus projects to make them a little bit broader. Also, we are not indicating costs here since the primary cost for most transit projects is operational, which is not always easy to project or not in line with a lot of the other infrastructure improvement costs that are indicated in this document. And then the bicycle and pedestrian lists, which came from the regional bicycle and pedestrian plan. So a constrained list of a number of the projects that are identified as tier 1, and then the vision list with the remaining projects. Any thought? Yeah.
I would just ask Chuck to write a to-do list. Would you dig up whatever is the current state of the Dickerson Road 2 bridges? They just, because I know that, I think they're both open and at 3 tons only, which means they can't really be used as a substitute for those little Bryce Mountain, the little tiny box bridge that I was just talking about. And I've just forgotten, but not for this minute, just
Yeah,
send me an email about that.
I looked them up yesterday,
Oh,
because
okay.
they're not in the plan.
Well, I was looking for them and thinking, what happened with those?
I'll have to go
It's been 10
check
years.
with the bridge section to find out what they're doing on those.
Okay.
Because they're not, right now, they show up as a need, but they're not show up on the list as program.
Right, because they went from 16 tons to 3 tons a couple of years ago or close, and then that sort of wipes out that parallel west of 29 parallel track. if we can't.
It's the 606 route that comes north from the airport. There's 2 bridges on that route.
A long one and a short one.
Short one, they did work on the short one,
Okay,
I thought. But
I
I
just
couldn't
can't-
find anything in the system on either one, so
okay,
I'll follow up with the bridge section and find out what's going on with that.
that's great.
That's chapter 8. Any addition, and that's the last chapter of the document.
All right. And then the appendix for all the good, gory details.
Exactly,
Fantastic.
exactly. And then appendix B, there's no information here yet about that, because that will be all the public comments that we receive at today's public hearing. We will also go back through the MPO Policy Board minutes, and I saw they did this last time, make sure that any public comments that related to the LRTP are included in that appendix B, as well as, of course, over the next any comments that we have received in this public comment period, which started a few weeks ago and will go until the next policy board meeting. Those will all be included in the public comments appendix B.
Very good. Any other questions for staff before we open the public hearing? All right, let us open the public hearing. Is there anyone who would like to address us on Long Range Transportation Plan 2045? Please run right up there.
So, sit, is that okay?
Sure, why not?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Policy Board, and everyone else. My name is Morgan Butler. I'm with the Southern Environmental Law Center, and I appreciate the opportunity to comment on this today. We'd first like to thank MPO staff for all of their hard work in developing the plan and for conducting the open houses and other public input opportunities along the way. This can be such a difficult process to get the public to engage in, but it's so important that we do so, and we appreciate the efforts that have been made. We see some notable improvements in the draft 2045 plan compared to the 2040 plan. Most importantly, the 2045 draft better emphasizes the importance of our region's multimodal facilities, meaning our public transit, our bike network, and our sidewalks. While roads remain a key part of our daily lives, making these alternative options more accessible and convenient is critical to ensure we are meeting the needs of all of our residents and creating a more environmentally sustainable transportation system. We also applaud the draft's recognition of some important high-level changes taking place that will transform transportation in the years to come. One of these is climate change. We're glad the draft recognizes the urgent need to reduce our transportation system's outsized contribution to regional greenhouse gas emissions by expanding multimodal options and better coordinating transportation planning and land use planning. In other words, ensuring we can get where we need to go without always having to hop into a car. The draft also recognizes the need to ensure our transportation system is resilient to the effects of climate change, such as more intense storms and more severe flooding events. We're glad the draft raises climate change, though we encourage you to expand on the discussion in the final version and continue to make this a larger focus in future planning. The draft also recognizes the many uncertainties stemming from changes in transportation technology, such as the growth of ride-sharing services, electric vehicles and e-scooters, and autonomous vehicles. This shifting landscape will undoubtedly require constant and careful planning going forward, including revisiting our traffic and travel projections on a frequent basis. Finally, shifting to the draft's recommended projects, we continue to support making solutions for the hydraulic Route 29 area a top priority. As you are well aware, the recent investments in the Route 29 solutions have helped to greatly improve safety and travel conditions along this corridor. But the 29 hydraulic 250 bypass triangle remains a key piece of the puzzle, and the community has already done a great deal of work with VDOT to identify and develop a set of recommended projects there. The exact form and sequence of some of those projects is always subject to additional tweaking, so we agree with the approach taken in the draft, including placeholders for them on the constrained list, while also keeping some of the project descriptions general enough to allow for some wiggle room going forward. That said, we do want to ask whether the project that consists of extending the left turn lane from the 250 bypass eastbound on the hydraulic road needs to be specifically mentioned and included on the constrained list to make sure that project will be eligible for any federal funding that may be forthcoming. In closing, thank you again for your hard work on the plan and for the opportunity to comment this afternoon.
Thank you. Anyone else? Please come up.
Good afternoon, Neil Williamson with the Free Enterprise Forum, and I share Mr. Butler's comments on much of what he had to say, especially about the manner in which staff has brought this forward, documents, better document. It is a challenge to work in this environment. I think this is my third long-range transportation plan, and it's definitely much better than when I got into this business. That being said, I agree with Councilor Galvin's request to have the total vision plan costed. I also recognize the challenge of that in something that I applaud VDOT for, which is project year dollars. We don't think it's ever going to get built, so what project year should we use? I would suggest footnoting it, creating a 10-year, just pick it at 10, and just say this is 10-year project year dollars. That's what it is. And be done with it. But I do think they need to be inflated by that realm. We also would appreciate, although probably not for this iteration, but the next one, our project lists to include, the project pages to include, they're referenced slightly but not directly with regard to the smart scale metrics, which are clearly important. I specifically believe that economic development should be called out in the project pages. It's a critical part of what transportation does, and I think that the roadways supporting economic development is critical. I agree with Mr. Butler regarding the 29 hydraulic interchange in the projects, and I commend his comments are much more thought out than mine, but I think the manner in which you're proceeding is correct. We do not believe that the long-range transportation plan is the place for a climate change treatise, but that's where Mr. Butler and I can differ. Finally, I appreciate the opportunity to speak, and I really do applaud the hard work. Thank you.
Thank you. Who else would like to speak to that? I see none, so we will close the public hearing. And we put this to bed for today and bring it back again next time, and you'll send us a link to the new things after you get the tweets in there, so we can look at it. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's great.
Madam Chair, one suggestion, if it's okay with you all, we'll send you the full document as it's revised.
Yeah.
But maybe at the next meeting, we'll just concentrate on the changes to it,
Yeah.
rather than make you
That'd be good.
see that some of these pages haven't changed over time. And with it being a public hearing, if the audience would like to, we'll have the full document should we need to bring anything up if there are any questions.
I think it depended in a way on the crowd and what they want.
Right.
Okay, very good. That's a good plan. Thank you very much. Well, we will now charge on to number 6, the hydraulic area plan implementation. Review an alternative and cost scenarios. And regarding that eastbound turn lane onto hydraulic, I don't know if that one section can just be separated out without the whole rest of the neighborhood. Somebody take a bulldozer and rip that median out of there and pave it. I mean, it seems like something you can do overnight that would make so much difference for the people backing that whole backup that happens morning and night, but especially in the evening. Goes back up over the bridge where people are trying to turn left. So I'm not an engineer and I don't have any, don't pretend to be. It seems like that would be a good small project to go to if you could.
We will take a look at, our intent is from the previous direction from the MPO and CTEC both, is we can take a look at that and look at also the differences between how it was submitted in Smart Scale and look at the options. Part of the cost, a good bit of the cost, were changes that were recommended by the communities there. Trying to, while improving the turning and the flow of traffic from 250 bypass onto hydraulic and hydraulic to the bypass, making sure that we try to improve the 2 connecting roads that are coming in. That's where a lot of the cost was.
I agree, that's the big
Yes.
picture, and it's a really
Yes.
important big picture. I just didn't know if it was feasible, reasonable, or a good idea to do the 50 yards of an
And that's
asphalt
what we-
lane first.
And that's what we're gonna take a look at.
Okay.
Because
And-
that's a safety problem right there, when people go rolling over the bridge at 55 and everything is just standing in front of them. I'm surprised there aren't more accidents.
Chuck, I don't remember the original numbers, but when we were looking at just the stacking lane on the bypass, it was $600,000 maybe.
I mean, that's-
Yeah, compared
All the
to
days roll to work.
compared to several million for the whole package. So we'll break that out for you because there may even be an opportunity there to go another route other than smart scale
Yeah.
as well.
Okay,
That's what I'm looking for.
So that'll be
okay.
a separate project.
I'm not sure I understand.
Oh.
I get that a lot.
My favorite situation.
She seems to be having a conversation with herself. I didn't want to talk about it.
What we have taken a look at and with just the consensus of the policy board is we will continue to look at the Zan Road crossing as a separate project. Just kind of as a quick reminder, we had 3 projects that we submitted to Smart Scale. That package 3 was Zan Road crossing, the Angus Road crossing, Hillsdale, and the 250 westbound ramps. This isn't the stacking lane, but the connectivity, doing away with the current ramps to 29 and connecting directly to Hillsdale when you're going westbound. So, that was over $100 million for those projects in the application amount. The second package that we applied for was just the intersection and 2 roundabouts, which was $109 million. Then package 3 was everything of $206 million. You can see that what we were talking about earlier, everything that was included for that 250 bypass hydraulic connection was over $6 million. And original estimates were $250,000 just for the 250 work. So
Wow.
quite a bit of difference there.
Yikes. Wow.
Yes. What we're, with the consensus from the policy board, is we'll continue to look at Zan Road as a separate project to itself. Take that and look at what it may score with the $18 million contributed to it from the existing Route 29 budget. And then we would also recommend to look at the Angus, Hillsdale 250 ramps as a separate project and score it out with the $18 million to it so that you can have a good, before we apply the smart scale, make sure which one may rank higher.
So you're gonna do Zan Road and then Angus?
Yeah, we've never broken out Angus, Hillsdale, and the 250 westbound ramps as a separate project. Yeah, we have Zan.
I just want to understand, but I thought the functionality was contingent upon a network. Chuck, you can do these things.
I mean, we looked at a bunch of different things. Angus, Hillsdale, and the 250 ramps function together.
Right.
You can do that separate from Zan. Just doing
Okay.
Hillsdale extension by itself doesn't really accomplish a whole lot. And unless you do something, you'd have to do something at 29 and Holiday Angus to actually make it work. So it's just, what do you want to do there? We didn't really look at other options for that location other than the Gully overpass. So But you could do Zan as a separate project, and
just
then
wanted
the
to
other three
confirm
as a
that,
separate
yeah.
project.
Right.
But Angus would have to be done with
With Hillsdale
Hillsdale.
and the ramps.
and the ranch.
Yes, so Angus, E, F, and G would become a project to consider.
Right, okay,
And then D would be a project to consider.
okay.
And so we're going to take a look right.
Okay, so the 59.7 million includes the cost of Hillsdale and 250?
Yes, that's
All right.
E, F, and G.
All right, okay.
E, F, and G
I wasn't
is
reading that
is roughly $60 million in the application, which is the future value of the money. Sand Road is the 36.9 million.
Keeps getting higher by 10 million at a time here. This
Here's,
is making me crazy.
if you, I don't want to go into great detail, but there's nearly $10 million worth of acquisition.
Oh,
And the right of way is something that we all need to work on. Because some of those same players have already.
Yeah, but these are two structures that are estimated to have to be taken. So it's roughly $10 million worth of right of way. So that's our intent, is to continue pursuing these two projects for funding.
so is there state revenue sharing money? So like, we'll look at that.
If the local governments, and I think we've talked about it before, is that the 18 million could possibly bring the cost down, but then the local governments would have to come up with half of that balance.
I just remember because of the way we're dealing with West Main Street, we're alternating between smart scale and revenue sharing monies, build it over time. And I don't know if that's,
Well, I think this is one though, where with West Main, you can phase it.
right, okay, you can't phase
You
it.
can't, you're gonna have to do all, either one of these two projects, you're gonna have to do them in entirety at the time. Yeah.
At the last meeting, there were some questions left with somebody about how that would break down. So that, I guess it was between 18 and $23 million was what we were talking about last time. And so, or $5 million apiece for the jurisdiction to come up with. But that's a cash match that we would then have to, that's not divided in half with revenue sharing for each of us. That, is it or not? I mean, it's, how do we assign that chunk?
To me, and Chuck, the way we were looking at it is, let's take the Sand Road. If it were 36 million, you could reduce it by 18. And I mean, this would be our request. I think it's VDOT's call if this would be acceptable, but you would reduce it by 18, which would make that then 18,000. 18 million, yeah. 18 million, I'm used to dealing with that. $18 million, that would be the project amount you could apply for revenue sharing. So you'd have to come up with 9 million, I mean, is that a?
Okay,
That was what I was asking.
yeah,
Yes.
that's kind of what I was getting at.
So you would
Yeah.
have, local governments would have to come up with half, which would be the 9 million.
So 4.5 each, basically, okay. Okay. Very good.
And then, the same scenario for the Angus Road Hillsdale, just a higher dollar amount that the 18 would come off of, which would make it even higher local contribution. Then that would be one that the local governments would have to look at, because that's solely in the city. Yeah. Or the other does split the city and county.
And could someone also help us figure out what the extra work is that's needed to be able to compare those two projects? Like, I understand that it's right away to be purchased, but the general layout is done and the general zoning is done for Zan, whereas I don't know if any of that is done for the other projects. So if there's 3 years worth of other stuff that has to happen for the other project, we need to know that.
Right.
Because I think we're losing 18 million if that's the
I
case.
think
They will not wait around for us
Yeah.
for 3 more.
with everything, the work we did for Smart Scale, we've got the right-of-way identified and estimated for the Angus and Hillsdale as well. You know, the same concerns on both projects would be in place of having to acquire the right-of-way. And you know, possible legal costs, yes, all of that.
Because there's some pretty big businesses in building.
But pursuing both of these, because one of the concerns we have is that though the dollar cost for Zan is much lower, it may not provide the transportation benefit to Scorewell if you're going for Smart Scale.
So it's high in economic development, but it's not.
Yes, you don't.
Safety and congestion would certainly be.
And congestion's gonna be a tough sell for Zan.
It's certainly gonna take people off of Hunter Road, but you have to sit through 6 lights right now to get across.
It's basically gotta be active development that's going on right then that you're reviewing or
You
you
can't
have
be
there. It
proactive.
doesn't look at what the benefit
there is
of
one.
putting the bridge in there and how it's gonna work on accessibility.
Well,
That's a separate.
Zan does have, I mean, you've got Stonefield
Yeah.
with some
There's a huge amount to do. It's-
Projects
and the
there.
big project
There
on the
was
other
some,
side,
we
right?
used it for
Yeah.
the project last time, and but that's how that can.
I think since then, there's additional, a lot more, right? A hotel, apartments,
Trail.
and apartments on Seminole, so there's the possibility there. For me, it's that congestion. Zan's going to, it's not going to be a big impact because it doesn't connect to 29.
Yeah, but it avoids hydraulic.
It helps, I'm not saying it doesn't help, I'm
I mean,
just,
that to me is the value of it from a congestion standpoint.
That argument would mean that Hillsdale isn't gonna help us either, and I guarantee you it is helping
Hillsdale's
every
helping
single
us,
day, 10 times.
and they're much more multimodal friendly.
but that doesn't contribute to the congestion so much as
That's the problem with this.
Yeah.
This small scale.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it factors into the score because they look at, how to bike pedestrian facilities that would be included in the project, and pull those trips off of the network. So it does get factored into the congestion score. And that's how it's impacted, plus you get points for those.
And that's what we want to spend this time doing is
Yeah.
running those numbers so that we know we can compare both projects. So that if we do submit for Smart Scale, we're submitting what we think will get funded.
And could you also go over the timetable, this next month, we're gonna be able to get this information?
No,
We're able to
no.
get on this?
No, not by next month, yeah. I mean, Smart Scale opens in March. So it's a year before we can even be submitting.
Right, but it takes months to get out of first base on all these projects, especially landowners and everything else.
So maybe we
But
can.
we don't get anything from the landowners.
Well, you might get something from landowners if they knew that there
Oh,
was a
I got you,
possibility.
I got
If
you.
you're never gonna talk about it,
Yeah,
nobody's gonna know.
yeah.
That's the benefit of having some discussion.
Yeah.
Here.
We can do with the LRTP and stuff coming, I don't want to overcommit over the next 30 days.
Okay.
That's what we can or can't.
Yeah, but maybe in the next 3 months.
Oh, yeah.
July meeting. It'll be 6 months before the blink of an eye goes by.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It will. That's what we're trying to get on this right now is that, and the other is to be, should the Zan Road look feasible financially, it may be something that the city and county would want to move on for the revenue sharing.
Yes.
And that opens up soon.
Yeah,
That's why-
yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
That's
That opens up
August,
in-
August,
That's September 1st.
okay, so
Okay.
that makes it a critical thing to
Yes.
do right now.
Okay.
okay.
Well, I know that from the discussions with the county board of supervisors, this is very much a full support ahead for this annual
That's,
grant.
that's what we're talking.
But,
Okay,
I think
sounds like we're on the right direction.
very good. So, no more decisions on this item, we're square with number 6. All right, let us jump on to the UPWP fiscal year 20. And we will see what we can do on that.
Okay, well, an overview, it was included in your packet, so we can take specific questions if you're interested. But I don't think I'll page through it
Very
page by
good.
page. I'll just give you a brief, so.
We don't want to finish it either.
Overview is, first of all, the UPWP is the Unified Planning Work Program, so it's a mechanism for coordination of transportation planning activities in the region, and it is required to show how federal funds will be used. So of course, major efforts from this past year were the Jefferson Area Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan, LRTP, among many other things, including holding meetings, and various things. And then the draft FY20 UPWP that we included is to be approved at the next meeting in May. So not today, but still we're here if you have any questions. So the overview, there's administrative activities included, including staffing committees, including communication and regional coordination. There are long-range planning activities included in the plan, including the transportation revenue study, regional transportation study that Chip already referenced, also bicycle and pedestrian corridor evaluation, and regional transit planning efforts. And then there are short-range planning initiatives, including a TIP update, so needing to create the next TIP, and also short-range project planning. So a notable amount of money indicated there for smart scale planning. So, any detailed questions or anything anyone wants to?
And I see the V-Trans update in there somewhere, I sort of lost track of my pages.
Yeah, it's
And
under,
there's a meeting coming up. Is there a presentation this month or next month in Culpeper, or is it
It's
just boards to?
as part of this meeting, they'll be doing an hour-long presentation on V-Trans.
And that's the hour before the.
The hour before
Okay,
the-
we're planning to go to that.
Spring, meeting.
And who's doing the V-Trans this time?
I think it's Jatender's going to be here presenting, who's basically the project manager of that program.
And with the department, not a consultant? Oh, how
Will
they-
be, yes.
Okay.
Their staff will be here.
Yes, that is an important point that CTV spring meeting will be up in the Culpeper district. I'm forgetting the exact date.
May 6th.
May 6th, thank you. Monday, May 6th.
4 p.m.
Yeah, 4 p.m. with the V-Trans presentation starting at 3.
And if anybody would like to join us for a litter pickup the hour before that.
I've heard those have been thrilling.
Right at the interchange at 666 in high school.
And
The Weir Escape Airport.
I think we'll be zooming in the door for 3 o'clock. Very good.
Okay, finally, other staff updates. There were a few updates provided by DRPT to reflect changes from what we had in the TIP that are now, so the TIP now reflects the draft fiscal year 20 6-year improvement plan that the state is putting out. So my understanding is that these have been reviewed by Kat and John. There were adjustments made to these different categories. I'm not going to pull up all the screenshots, but the general overview is that there is an increase in operating assistance for Kat and John over what had been previously indicated in the TIP for these years. There was a change in the year where John expects to replace rolling stock, and also a removal of fiscal year 20 funds for new John rolling stock. And finally, and I'll let others comment on any of these that need clarification. Finally, some reductions or removal of funding for John support vehicles and ADP hardware and software.
And none of that is a surprise to you.
Yeah,
Okay. Just wanted
Yeah, it's
bureaucracy is best.
That's why I didn't go to the extra step of pulling in all the
Yes.
screenshots.
Please don't tell us about
If you
what's
wanna
going
know
on.
what the TIP looks like now, it's on our website.
Yeah. No.
Feel free to dig in.
Approve it after it's been decided.
Read it after you vote on it, isn't that what people say? Okay.
And the regional transit partnership.
Yep, just very quickly, the regional transit partnership meets tomorrow. The two big agenda items there, the biggest being the final draft of the memorandum of understanding between the city of Charlottesville and Albemarle County for the CAT service. This will be the first time one of these will be entertained. And also DRPT will be talking about the new funding scenario for fiscal year 20 for transit funding from the state. So they'll be doing a presentation on that. Those are the two main agenda items tomorrow.
And I should know this, but I know that I can chase Diane to get the answer. Are there performance indicators in your memo, the agreement?
Performance
with
indicators.
City, county, MPO, CAT operation for evaluation?
No,
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 it's-
there's not. It's strictly it's besides all the kind of bureaucratic stuff of who's responsible for what. The main thing is breaking down the routes that are outside of the city as a county financial responsibility. What's inside the city is 100% the city's. And then the formula that shows the hourly cost to provide service, backing out the rider fees and the grants on a per hour amount for the hours that service is in the county. So it's a, I don't want to call it a contract, but it would be similar to just a fee-based contract. For X number of hours and this dollar amount, this is what the contribution
So
will be.
this will help us predict the cost of a route.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
yes,
And then
yes.
is there also, and if it's not, then maybe this is something RTP can look forward to working on, is what the reporting is gonna be like, so that if, I remember being very surprised last year when the director said, oh, by the way, we haven't been running buses, we thought we were gonna run.
That's in there.
Drivers, and we were never told about that, and we're still paying.
No,
for
there's-
stuff.
and let me say
Buses were never
that
paid.
There are
So,
kind of performance
that's-
agreements and what's in terms of outlining expectations between the parties,
Yes.
but it's not like there are performance metrics.
Right, and that's what I was.
But there's a process that if things aren't running, we need to be notified.
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
that's only
Yes,
fair,
yes,
that
yes.
makes
Yes,
sense.
yes, yes. As well as a procedure of how you would go about should the city want to start running to the airport. There's procedures of how that process would take place, just as if the county wanted to start running to the airport. So it just spells out how you would go about that approval process.
Lucky to the airport would be a place to start.
Just for examples.
Yes.
And
Very
that's
good. Any other staff updates we need to worry about?
not so much.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions to leave with staff for homework for next time?
Jim, it's pretty far out with the 2020 census, but I was in a meeting the other day, and it was mentioned that if the growth in Greene County actually pans out the way it's expected, that they would be pulled into the MPO.
Yes, actually, not just, we did as Jacob, you might, when we were doing the modeling for the long-range transportation plan, we included modeling, both in the Greene County and into the Lake Monticello area. It's very likely because of density, both of those would qualify to come in.
Okay, it covered Zion's Crossroads.
Yes. Yeah.
So that it covered that whole area.
But that doesn't mean that whole area will or is likely to be part of next time. I don't know if I think in UPWB, we actually indicate doing a little more of that.
Yeah.
Potentially doing a bit more of that analysis to try to predict.
And then they would have to decide to join, because I remember Green said,
No,
last
yeah,
time, they just told us to go away.
Certain thresholds become its de facto part.
So maybe they were not quite to the threshold of mandatory last time. and they said,
Right.
"Forget it."
And it's pretty sure it will be over. Now, it won't bump us into the higher category for transit.
Oh, good.
Yeah, which is, I think, in excess of 200,000. But it's pretty sure that the Ruckersville area and parts of Louisa and Savannah will come in.
Okay.
As y'all look into that more, can you include me and Dewan and Kat? Because my other side of that concern is the urbanized areas. That one is like 500 feet away from possibly being part of the 5307 urbanized area definition. And so I suspect, or you want to better understand that if Green's portion of that, their urban area gets to a certain point, is it going to close that gap of that 500 feet that then the transit urbanized area then becomes larger?
Definitely.
So it's something to just be aware of, because that affects transit funding and other stuff.
As we learned looking at that Stanton to Charlottesville route, the MPO is on one side of I-64 at Crozet and not on the other. And it makes a difference as to what funding, federal funding is available, just on which side of the interstate. So
It may not.
warrant. But it could. But it could. Yes.
I'd rather have to wait a couple of years to realize that
Yes.
Yeah.
Finance.
something changed.
All right, great. Any other questions? Homework for staff? None. All right. This says next meeting, May 22nd. And I will ask, are there members of the public who would like to say anything else to us? Come on, run at once. Okay, then we will close that part of the agenda. And any other notes before we run? All right, well, thank you very much. It was another spectacular meeting. And, great, we'll look forward to carpooling up to Caledonia. So the CB's meeting all the minutes before the next meeting, I was not sure. I have to CB's about.
It's just like,
Okay. There you go. Everyone has a chance
She wants to present her all that.